This conference will now be recorded.
Trying to get better at it. But even when I'm writing myself those sticky notes, it doesn't work. Um, yeah, so we don't have a lot administratively this week. So we can kind of jump into the training that I have. I wanted to talk about, we're going to talk about therapy with kids today, play therapy, but it's not just with kids because sometimes you can use some of these techniques with adolescents and adults too, depending on what they are. So we all know that unless you specifically took trainings or if you specifically took a class in grad school about working with kids, that there's not a whole lot of attention and education that's given to people about working with this very, very specific population. And so a lot of people, when they start here, may have very limited experience working with kids, open to starting to do that, but not a lot of formal training or experience, and they're just kind of picking up things as they go. So I wanted to, it's of course something that there could be hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of trainings about it, and books and videos and tons of stuff with play therapy techniques. But I wanted to talk about it um, from a basics level and then get into some specifics. But also in there, I felt like it was a good place um, for us to also crowdsource. So if you have techniques or things that you've done that's really worked for you, or things that you like to keep in your toolbox, then let's hear it so we all can collaborate together and get ideas from each other. It's fun. Um, it's can be really fun to do and be creative, and I can't go to a store without seeing things and automatically thinking, okay, how could I integrate that into an intervention? Um, so it's also easy to spend a lot of money on tools for it, but you don't have to. And so that's the kind of balance there. Um, there was something else very, very profound that I was going to say, and it went away. So, um, let's see.
While you're thinking, if anybody does have any resources that they are sharing today, if they could follow up in an email to me so that I could sort of put them all together in one document, whether it's a link or a product or a game, whatever, just send it to me so that I can add it to the folder for this meeting so we can find it again later.
There you go. Um, yes, and Nicole, make a note. We do need to rekey that door downstairs so we can make that into. We have stuff that has started to become accumulated there, but repository of essentially a lending library and also a thrift store, I suppose, a free thrift store, where if people have things that they want to donate, that other clinicians can use, especially if they're just starting to build their play therapy tools and might need some additional items, that they can go there. And then also a lending library that has books or games or other activities that people can check out. So what we're going to do is rekey it's the closet in the waiting room of Suite 200. We have two cabinets in there, or two, not cabinets, bookshelves in there, that we've been trying to amass things there. Also, things like old magazines and things like that that people can use for, you know, doing collages or vision boards and things like that. So this is, let's see. Oh, let's hope I can share the right screen. Uh, no, it's sharing. There we go. And it took it away. Let's see. Okay, you see the slideshow? Okay. All right. So the first thing I found is this video that is about trauma and play therapy. Of course, not all of the clients that we see that we're using play therapy with have trauma, but that is a component to probably the majority of our clients at some point. So this is a good kind of basic uh, video that is also interesting, that goes into that, and so we're starting this to talk about why play therapy works, how the brain works, and all of that stuff. So yeah, here is the video. Can y'all hear that?
It was Plato who said you can learn more about a person in an hour of play than in a year of conversation. I am a play therapist, and nowhere is this more true than when I'm working with traumatized children. I'm going to share with you this afternoon about play and trauma and the power of one to heal the other. So when I went to graduate school for clinical social work, I already knew that I wanted to work with traumatized children. I learned some valuable things in my graduate program, including how to do differential diagnosis, how to do a suicide risk assessment, and how to do fairly traditional talk therapy with regulated grown-ups. I did not, however, learn what to do with a 3-year-old who is trying to pee on me from across the room, or a 6-year-old who is trying to stab me with adult scissors, both things that happened as soon as I got into my first job out of school. So I was desperate for answers for these children. And I went to my first conference on play therapy. It was hosted by the Association for Play Therapy, and it was in Orlando, Florida that year. And I fell madly in love with the field and really do believe that play is the primary language of children. And for traumatized children especially, the play is their talk and toys are their words. I'm going to give you an example of that up here on the screen, but first I'd like to lead you in a very brief exercise. If you would turn to your neighbor and share one of your most embarrassing experiences with them. Okay, I'm not going to really have you do that. And everyone's relieved. But what if instead I had said, turn to your neighbor and share your most shameful sexual experience? I think you would have been hard pressed to do so, right? And if we as high functioning grown-ups find that difficult, how much more challenging is it for the little ones who have limited experience and limited vocabulary? So this is the play creation of a child who's been sexually abused. He came into my playroom, he undressed the baby doll, he got the doctor's kit and started to fix it. And after a couple of minutes of intense fixing, he sighs, and then he goes over, gets the spider, he puts it on the private parts of the baby, and he says, Miss Pewith, take a picture. He doesn't have any words to describe his abuse experience, but he can create an evocative image that communicates visceral volumes to us. So I remember being in my first play therapy workshop and seeing slide after slide of this kind of art and sand and play creations, what I now call the glimpses and snapshots of trauma that children gift us with along the way. And the speaker was helping us to become kind of bigger containers for the story, so that when a child gives us a glimpse of trauma, I can say, I see what you're showing me, and you can show me more. I see what you're showing me, and you can show me more. I was hooked, armed with this new understanding that children can articulate the unspeakable through play. I returned to my little inner city school office and turned it into a playroom. Very soon after that, I had a young lady come to school who was wearing the same clothes she'd been in the day before, and she was bouncing off the walls, which was highly unusual for her. So I pulled her aside, and I was pretty quickly able to get the kind of superficial, linguistic, linear narrative of what had happened. Her mom had gone out to do her second job. She had forgotten to leave a key under the mat, and my client and her sister had spent the night on the front porch in a very violent neighborhood. When she comes to school the next day, I'm not going to try to therapize her right away, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. First, I make sure she has a good meal. Then I put her on a cot in a darkened room for a couple of hours and let her sleep, because if she had any sleep at all on the front porch, it was hypervigilant sleep. And only then do I bring her to my playroom. And even then, I don't ask her to give me more details of the scary thing that happened. I introduce her to the tools of play. And she goes directly over to the child guitar and starts to strum, pretty frenetically at first. But as she calmed, I invited her to create a song. And this is her creation. So it hurts inside so bad. This is why we do the work that we do. I was aghast at this child's ability to take those tools of play, combine them with her story, and get to deeper and deeper levels of emotional expression. This was a pretty sophisticated telling. I have lots of other children who don't have any words to describe their abuse experiences. And some of that has to do with the ways trauma gets stored. It's more in the right hemisphere than in the left, and children already live more in the right hemisphere than in the left. Trauma also gets stored iconically and somatically, so in pictures and in our bodies. So the ways in which we invite children to show us and tell us have to honor those ways in which we store trauma. Johnny is one of my best examples of that. Johnny was playing in the living room with Legos when his mother's boyfriend barged in, high as a kite, grabbed the first thing he could find, which happened to be a clothing iron, and bludgeoned Mom repeatedly until she slipped into unconsciousness. The children thought she had died. She did not die. She, in fact, made a remarkable recovery. But at the time that they came to see me, the children were living with their grandmother, and Mom was recovering in the hospital. And so the first day he comes to see me, he draws a picture of Mom that looks like this. So you see the tears coming down Mom's face. You see the wide open mouth where she's crying for help. He also talked about there being blood on a pillow. He then went over to my home living section and he took a little wooden iron and he said, "Miss Pewith, can you draw this?" So I drew the iron. And then he looked at it for a minute and he went and got the purple Play-Doh and he stuck it on the iron. What is he showing us? What his words cannot. It would take me some time to get to the gray matter of the brain stuck to a household object, right? But he was able to tell us quickly through his iconic expression. So it's these insidious encodings of trauma that hijack us when we least expect it through a little thing called the amygdala. The amygdala is an almond-shaped cluster of cells in the midbrain that are sort of the seat of somatosensory memories as they relate to heightened emotional experiences. So if you have had a joyful memory, the day you got married or the day your baby was put in your arms for the first time, you probably have some crystal clear sense memories of that event. So the taste of the wedding cake or the smell of your new baby's head, if that is true of your joyful memories, then it is doubly true of the things that terrify us. We are not meant to hold the atrocities that we are often forced to hold. You have a fist come at your face and hit you. The next time a fist comes at your face, you duck out of the way. The thing is that the amygdala is a pretty sloppy processor. And so I like to unpack this using a little army guy. I'll say to the kids and their parents, let's pretend like this guy is in Iraq and his job is to take care of the tanks. So he gets up in the morning and he's washing the big windshield of the tank and he hears gunshots, bang, bang, and he drops to the ground. His heart starts to race. He freezes. He doesn't move till it's over. When it's over, he checks himself and he's safe. He didn't get hurt. The next day, he and a buddy are out there trying to get the mud off the big tread tires of the tank. And again, he hears gunshots, bang, bang, and they drop to the ground. His buddy doesn't get drop quite as fast and gets a little bit hurt. He's okay, he just needs a Band-Aid. But our guy drops really fast, and that keeps him safe. And that happens day after day in Iraq. And after a year's tour of duty, he gets to come home. And he's been home for maybe 6 months, and he's out at the mall doing some Christmas shopping, and he is laden down with packages, walking in the parking lot, and he hears a car door slam, Bang, what's he gonna do? And 5-year-olds can tell me he's gonna drop to the ground. We just don't do it with scientific jargon and tell children, your brain becomes habituated to the stimuli. We don't do that with kids, but we can give children and their caregivers permission for the idiosyncratic ways that children tell us about trauma. We call this post-traumatic play, and Bobby is really my best example of this. He was 4 at the time that he came to my playroom. He had grown up in domestic violence for the first 3.5 years of his life. Mom and dad then split, and he lived with mom. Dad would come to pick him up for visits. One day when dad came to the front door, he seemed calm and regulated. He asked to use the restroom. So mom said sure and let him in. The dad took Bobby in the bathroom with him, locked the door, and then he shot himself. Bobby was trapped in the stuff of the trauma for about 15 minutes. So when he first comes to my playroom, he goes directly over to the red finger paint and he mucks around in it. And then he goes over to my water source and he washes his hands. And then he goes over to the red Play-Doh and he mucks around in it. And he goes over to the water source and he washes his hands. These are called cleansing rituals in trauma play, and we see it when children have a full body dirtying experience from their trauma. They then need a full body kinesthetic experience of being cleansed from trauma. I could tell you more about Bobby's play process. It was pretty amazing. When he became more regulated and I could give a more directive prompt, I invited him to choose from the miniatures on the wall a toy to be his mom. And he chose a nicely dressed woman with a cake, pretty nurturing. I invited him to go and choose a toy to be himself, and he chose a disproportionately small naked baby, which I think shows the vulnerability and the chaos of the aftermath of the bathroom. And then I said, go and choose a toy to be dad. And he gets all the way over to the shelves, and he turns to me and he says, Miss Pewith, can I choose more than one? And I said, you can do whatever you need to do in here, which is my standard response. And he chose 3. He chose a giant aggressive wrestling figure, a little nondescript kind of wimpy character, and Prince Charming. What is that? It's the domestic violence cycle. It's what I went to graduate school to learn about. It's what we see on the billboards on the side of the road. This 4-year-old was more expert in the domestic violence cycle than I will ever be, not having lived through it. He did not have the words to show us, but he was eloquently able to articulate the 3 faces of dad in his play. And just because children have words does not mean that will be their chosen form of expression. So I learned this from Danny. Danny is an 11-year-old boy who was growing up in significant neglect, maltreatment, lots of sexual abuse in his background for the first 5 years of his life. Then he moved in with a wonderful adoptive mom and afterwards came to see me. And he's already taller than me when he comes in 3.5 months into treatment. And he says, I want to wash the babies, and points to the tub on the top shelf. I say, okay, we're going to get the tub down. So I bring it down. He fills it with hot water and soap. He gets a baby doll and undresses it. And he begins to wash the head of his baby. And as he washes the head of his baby and he's looking at it, he says, my mama used to shove my face in my baby brother's shit diaper. And I say, that sounds like a really important part of your story. Thank you for sharing it with me. And I believe so strongly in these glimpses and snapshots of trauma that children gift us with along the way that I keep little sticky notepads under everything at Nurture House. And so I grab one out and I extend the moment of holding the story with him just a little. My mama, and he comes around behind me and he wants to make sure I get it right. And I would suggest to you that he was only able to tell me about that humiliating, shaming experience because he was actively engaged in washing the baby. The play itself mitigates the approach to the trauma. So why is play so powerful this way? Well, it helps us to understand a little bit about bottom-up brain development. So the reptilian brainstem begins to grow first in utero and is responsible for breathing and heart rate and respiration, all the basics, keeps us feeling good. The limbic brain or feeling brain grows over that. And then eventually the thinking brain or neocortex grows over that, but is highly underdeveloped in human babies at birth. So Becky Bailey, a developmental psychologist, created an elegant pairing of simple questions with each part of the triune brain. So the reptilian brainstem is always asking, am I safe? The limbic brain is always asking, am I loved? And then the thinking brain is asking, what can I learn from this? But if the lower brain region questions aren't answered satisfactorily, then the thinking brain is offline. I was deeply convicted that I wasn't giving enough yes to these children yet. So I went in search of sweet, cozy space that would answer those lower brain region questions. Am I safe and am I loved? With resounding yeses. And that became Nurture House, the trauma treatment center you see on the screen. Everything about the way that Nurture House is put together is based on our most current understandings of the intersection of the neurobiology of play and the neurobiology of trauma. At any given moment when you walk into Nurture House, you will hear laughter and see high fives. You will see kids eating and jumping and playing for their lives. There's a secret drama unfolding beneath the surface, an epic neurochemical boxing match in which the stress hormones and the joy hormones are vying for primacy. And play gives the joy hormones a leg up. So how does it do this? Well, this is my picture of cortisol. Cortisol, and I don't know what it means that this was my son and I took the picture before I took the cortisol inducing thing off his head. Um, so cortisol is the stress hormone and is needed in our bodies for us to move forward. I probably wouldn't have been here on time today if I didn't have some cortisol. But when it is released in massive quantities in our bloodstreams due to overwhelmingly terrifying events, it can make us sick. And it's responsible for a lot of the big behaviors that we see in traumatized children. If this is a picture of cortisol, then this is a picture of oxytocin. Oxytocin is the bonding chemical, and it's released between mom and baby while they are nursing. Joy chemicals, dopamine, are also released and are enhanced through competency and mastery experiences in play. So when a baby is in a mommy's arms and he goes, "Ah," and she goes, "agoo," in that moment, the baby learns that he can impact the world, that he has a voice, and that he matters. We want as much oxytocin and dopamine on board during trauma recovery as we can get. So play becomes the digestive enzyme that metabolizes trauma. How does this digestion happen? It's bit by bit, and it's in the presence of an other. So play can help to tell the story, but the story has to be heard and held. Maya Angelou wrote, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of us. Sharing it with an other helps to leach the toxicity out of it." I have the great privilege of getting to be an other for the children and families in my care. You have the great privilege of getting to be an other for those in your spheres of influence. So I would leave you with two questions. Whose stories are you meant to hold? And how do you bring your playful presence to those around you? Thank you.
Nope, don't want to redo that. There we go. So this is, she talked about the triune brain and she talked about these brain states. The triune brain, there's controversy about if it exists or not exists or how it's broken down, but it is reasonable to understand the way a brain works as having different functions and they all work together. And a big piece of when we're working with kids, but even when we're working with adults who are having trauma responses, to provide psychoeducation about why they're having the symptoms and the behaviors that they're having. And it's important for us to know this on using terms like lay people terms that are understandable to anybody. In the video, she used the example of the combat veteran And that's one, an experience like that is one that you can easily explain how triggers develop and how they work even when someone's not experiencing trauma. So it is important for you to have a decent enough understanding of how these things develop, so then you can teach it to someone else in a way that they can understand it. So some of these, the information we'll talk about in the next few slides, are to help explain those things um, to parents and to clients about why things develop, why behaviors exist, and things like that. I know, pretty much if you've ever worked with a kid or a teenager, which is everyone here, at some point you have had a parent say, all you do is play, or all you do is play games with my kid, or all you do is art. And has anyone not had someone say that to them? Yes. So it's an important part of the work that we do, so we can explain to the parent or caregiver or the client um, why we're using these interventions and how it relates back to the science of it, how it relates back to actually being able to help the client. Um, and so it's important to do that in a non-defensive way, but also, we as clinicians need to start from a place that we can't make assumptions about what someone does or doesn't understand about child development, trauma responses, and things like that. So we can start kind of at the beginning with explaining why we do certain things, and showing it from, discussing from brain information is one of the best ways to do it. So this specific example is coming from the conscious discipline brain state model, but it's related to what she said. So you have the survival state, which is the more basic primal functions. We talk about it when we talk about trauma responses and triggers developing. And then we have the emotional state, and then the executive state. The executive state is where you learn cause and effect, where things like developing a behavior system developed on consequences and rewards. Someone has to be functioning in an executive state in order for consequences and rewards to make sense to them to start to build those habits. So, this is why behavior management systems don't always work on children, and why parents get frustrated and say, well, I've tried everything and it doesn't work, because we're skipping those steps. So if you try to enact a behavior management system in a home or on a child that is in a survival state most of the time, cause and effect, it's not making connections. So you have to go back to creating a situation that the child feels safe enough to be emotionally regulated. So those are the questions that you ask from the beginning. Am I safe? The questions you ask when you ask how you're interacting with the client. Am I a safe person for them to do the work they need to do? Is my office a safe place? And we'll get there about things you can do to set up your office. So are those things that are in my control safe? But also starting to explore things when you're working with the client about what their home environment is. Is that a safe place for the client, for a caregiver? And what can you do to help them address those things that maybe not feel as safe? Once you feel that there's safety that's been established, then moving into an emotional state of asking yourself, am I loved? Now, when I'm saying am I loved, and asking yourself, are you loving your client? I don't mean like in a inappropriate, no boundaries kind of way, but love in general that we have for other human beings, in that we want to see them flourish and succeed. So, am I behaving in a loving way towards my client and towards the caregiver? And that can sometimes be a difficult thing for us to do, both with clients and caregivers, because we're also humans that have our own triggers and frustrations and needs as well. But it's important that we keep coming back to, am I loved? Both of these things to me also are important for us to maintain our knowledge that those are the two most important things, whether it's with a child or an adult, in forming a therapeutic rapport and environment that allows clients to move forward with other interventions, whether it's play therapy, whether it's CBT, whether it's DBT. Those two things need to exist for our clients to be able to move into an executive state. So if we're not maintaining that, we're not creating an environment that's conducive for those things. So that also means when a parent comes in and says, he got suspended again from school, you need to address that. Cool. I'm not the disciplinarian, so we can address that, but how you address it as a therapist is different than how a parent addresses it. You're creating a space where the client can maybe process that moment with you, why they made the choices they did, how they feel about it, what's going to happen with consequences now that are happening at school and at home. But we're not just another adult in their life that's telling them all the shitty mistakes that they make in their life. They have that. So we're creating those other environments for that. But you'll get pushback from caregivers about that, about all you're doing is play, all you're doing whatever. But you have to know the basis of why we do what we do. A, it helps you feel comfortable knowing that, and you're not going to be as pressured to do those, to do things that you know aren't therapeutic in that moment, especially if you're a newer clinician and might be feeling some of those imposter syndrome things, that you know what's behind that and why you have the interactions that you do with your clients. Any kind of thoughts about this before I move on with this slide? Um, this is a example too. It's another one, both of these slides you can use to help explain things to parents about why we're doing what we're doing. But this is a good graphic to explain really the energy that goes towards these different parts of what the brain is focusing on, and the pyramid is the word I'm looking for. On the left is a typical development. So, survival is at the base of it. And it's what infants and toddlers and things like that, they're focused on survival infants. They start to learn regulation first. So, all of these are developing. Survival develops first, then regulation, then social, emotional, then cognitions. Um, and as a child gets older, as an adult um, is growing, we need to spend less and less conscious mental energy on the survival piece of it, and we're able to use more energy focusing on the cognitive piece. But if you have a child or an adult that has developmental trauma, they're using so much more of that energy in the survival and in the regulation. So, if you have a client, whether it's a child or an adolescent or an adult that has developmental trauma, which would be in childhood, repeated or chronic traumas, that's what's considered developmental trauma, then your interventions need to start with the survival and the regulation pieces. If you jump to the cognitive pieces, you're not going to get anywhere. You have to start where they are living. They are living in a survival and regulation brain. Then we also look at the clients that we're dealing with. So this is why it's important that you know more than just what the client brings to the table. And this is where our specialty is versus a psychiatrist versus a neurologist versus a pediatrician, who they have parents and caregivers fill out a Connor scale or something to assess for ADHD, but they're not taking the full social history environmental history of the client. This is what we have the time to do in the in-depths and in weekly sessions, that we're putting this full picture together, that we're really able to see what are the strengths and what are the barriers to the client. We know from the work that we've done here that for the most part, um, when we have clients that come in that have Medicaid for their insurance, because they have financial barriers, they also have a lot of other barriers that fall into that survival skill. We have clients that don't have transportation. We have clients that are homeless, children that are homeless, um, that are wondering where they're going to get their next meal. Well, you can't talk to them about sitting still in class and paying attention and getting an A when they're couch surfing and there's violence going on in the home. So you can't do and focus on the same things with that child as you can with someone who is not having to deal with all of those things. So you have to tailor the interventions that you do to the development of your client, to what their developmental level is, and then also all of their other needs that they have there. Playing boosts confidence in children by providing an outlet for expanding self expression, increasing their knowledge of self, transferring ideas into real life, relieving boredom, problem solving, relieving stress, and making connections with other people. So some of these specific things, they're coming from play therapy organizations that are identifying this. Again, these are ways that you can explain the work that we're doing with play to parents or caregivers so they understand that it's not just play that you're doing. It is play that you're doing. It is fun, and a client may enjoy the time they spend with you, but they're also working on these other skills. And I just wanted to highlight the making connections with other people, because that is, for most people, the single most healing thing that they can do is have true, safe, healthy connections with other people. And so by playing with our clients, then we're creating those experiences. And a lot of the clients in general, just a lot of children in general, don't have times where they're able to develop those playful relationships with adults in their life. It's difficult for parents sometimes to find the time to engage in those playful experiences as well, and that's something that we can do to integrate parents into family therapy and to provide those really kind of bonding moments between a caregiver and a child and helping them play together.
Kathy, can I jump in for a second? Just to
Absolutely.
kind of piggyback off of that, with the making connections with other people, I have a lot of adults that I'm working with who have like childhood sexual abuse trauma and things like that. And one of the common, I guess, newer phrases I've been hearing is, I don't people well. And I
Mm.
think that really leans into a lot of trust that's broken as well too with people, especially kids who dealt with things like that and it really never got healed. And here, these clients of mine are in their late 30s or late 40s, and, we're still talking about these, or they find themselves just now talking about these things from childhood that they weren't able to. I find myself going back to a lot of like really, I don't know, elementary quote unquote things with them. And it's helpful.
So what are some examples of some, like you say, elementary things that you do to start to build those relationships?
So like having the coloring, that's a big thing. A lot of the adults, even myself, have a couple of those adult coloring books where it's really intricate. So I have like a kind of like a blank gingerbread man kind of printout, just like of a basic body, where do you feel this when, this is happening? I have someone who had a home invasion, and her and her children, three kids, and she was by herself, to where, I mean, fireworks on the 4th of July is still a problem. just a couple weeks ago. The DoorDash person didn't leave at the door like they were supposed to and knocked, and then she ran. So little things like that, even we're still, I'm always like, how can we connect like what's happening in real life to what we're feeling on our body?
Mhm.
Where is that disconnect coming from? What are we still thinking about, when we hear those noises? And I find that the more, then it's kind of more integrated too, because then we'll go into more narrative therapy, and then I'm learning and she's sharing more with every time, we're revisiting a section of her story. And then just making those connections between reality and our bodies, our trauma response, basically.
Mhm. Thank you. Um, some other things like that are very simple, but ways to build those bonds are show up on time and when you say you're going to be there, communicate. Um, don't make promises that you're not going to be able to keep, but if you do, like, if you do say that you're going to do something, do it. Remember your client and their story from session to session, so they feel like you heard me and you still hear me even though it's been a week or two since you saw me. So whatever it is that you need to do for yourself, if you do have a difficult time kind of keeping clients straight, take the notes that you then review before you see the client for the next session so you can pick up where you left off. But those are all things to build a trusting relationship. And then, of course, we'll talk in a second about the environment and the things that you bring um, for yourself there. This graphic is one 7 ways board games boost mental health. And this is a list that Shayna made because we all know that Shayna is the board game therapy person. So games build relationships. They teach you how to manage resources and make decisions. Games build frustration tolerance and allow you to learn from mistakes. They offer a way to learn about others and how they think, offer a way to learn about yourself and how you think, build critical thinking skills, and are a fun and safe way to learn lessons. She also created a resource guide that has some um, board games that she's kind of separated a little bit by category of, which games can be played with 2 people or more. Are they cooperative? Are they competitive? So they're on that list. And then, as you know, when she does Toolbox Tuesdays, then she's um, teaching how to integrate games into there. But these are also some of these specific um, things from this list are, again, ways that you can explain to a caregiver, we're not just playing games, we're doing this. It helps you with planning a session. Are there any of these things that you're needing to work on with a client? And then how can you do that? How can you integrate a game into doing that? What kind of game do you need to make that happen? If you need suggestions on that or what kind of things to look for, I'm totally offering up Shayna's time to to ask her. But you can also, of course, ask me, ask Olivia. I'm offering up Olivia's because she's a big game player too. Um, uh, so that's just something there. Okay, setting up your office. So I included um, there in the drive. There are some. You know what? I don't think I uploaded that one. I've got to do that. There's a PDF that has like a whole list of different kinds of toys and things like that. But there's a great article about setting up a play therapy office. And I'm reading it. And first of all, I didn't agree with 100% of it. But then I realized kind of towards the end that they're talking about sometimes people, especially in private practices, will set up one office. It's like a play therapy office, and the therapists have to book space in that time. And then their office where they might not be seeing clients for play therapy is set up differently. Of course, here we are all using, we're setting up our office. And then if you're also using play therapy, you're trying to integrate that into the space that you have. So there's a little bit of differences in how you would set it up. For example, in play therapy offices, they're going to have sometimes the toys of being more readily visible. Whereas in your office, you probably want to have those um, visually out of sight. So we'll talk about some of those differences here. Um, First thing is thinking about setting up your office in a way that's taking into consideration senses. So, what do you see when you walk in? Is it cluttered? Is it a mess? How does that make you feel? How is that going to make clients feel? How is that going to make a traumatized adult feel? How is that going to make an ADHD kiddo feel? How can we make it feel as soothing for everybody as we can when they first walk in? So, being organized and predictable is a piece of that. Um, there's a few offices, like all kind of whatever. I know, for example, Melissa's office, she has the big cubbies and she has her toys organized in the cubbies, but they're visually out of the way. So that gives her some predictability in terms of being able to specifically pull out items for the clients rather than clients kind of going wild. Angel's office, she's got, I mean, her office has got more toys in it than Toys R Us probably. But they are all organized. And when you first walk in, you don't immediately see everything. When you start looking, you see she's got some stuff shoved in between the couch and the wall that has a blanket over it. So you don't see that. You see just soft, comfortable things. She also has a big armoire that closes things away. So having the visual stimulation to be as minimal um, as you can with the items that you have. Um, Also think about things like the lighting. Do you have the overhead light on? Do you use the lamps? If you have a window, are you using that? Um, and how do you feel with that too? So I know a lot of y'all cover the light sensor and then use lamps in the windows. Thinking about sound. Are you, is the sound machine outside of your office? Can you hear mumbling from next door? Do you have things on in your office? I know for the most part, what we've noticed is with sound, if you have the sound machine outside of your office, you'll want to make sure that it's the white noise or that it's a very regular sound. The things that are like rainforests that occasionally have birds chirping and monkeys cawing tend to be more overstimulating than just a white noise that people don't really pay any attention to. What does it smell like? So, my suggestion with smells are to have it smell as neutral as possible and then have options that clients can choose smells on certain things. So, what I mean by that is, I mean, smell can be a huge trigger for people. And so, if your office always smells like lavender, but lavender is stimulating for someone in a bad way, it's going to set them off and they may not know why. But if you keep maybe some basic scents like lavender and citrus and vanilla and eucalyptus in, um, the little things, oil droppers or whatever, then you can have um, cotton balls or something like that that clients can put on that and then they can smell those rather than having an overpowering scent of air freshener or something like that. Um, a consideration is also, is your client hungry? What time of day are you seeing the client? So I know, especially with kids, we have to think about their physiological needs that they may not have had taken care of before they come to session. So when you see littles, You don't want to have a late therapy session. Pretty much anything after 6, you don't want to do with littles because they're not going to be in a space for it. They're going to be tired. They're going to be cranky. They're going to be hungry. Um, Hunger. Is a child coming from school? Have they had their snack? Do they need to eat? Eating is one of those things, like if you're going to feed your client, you need to ask permission from the parent in order to feed them. Make sure there's no food allergies. And if you do keep snacks in your office, make sure that they're not messy and preferably allergy free. So, you know, the suggestions I give for that are easy ones that I'll like send with my kid to school things are pretzels and goldfish. Um, because they're not going to be sticky. They don't have nuts. And for the most part, like people enjoy them. So that is a consideration too. If you have a grumpy kid who's hungry or adult, do y'all need to have a few pretzels? So then also think about cleaning up, making sure that your office is set up in a way that is allows for messiness, allows a kiddo to be a little wild, but also makes it easy to clean up. Think about your triggers and plan for them. So if you become dysregulated because you have this really cool thing that your grandma gave you that you want to have in your office because it reminds you of her, but you get a little freaked out if your clients get too close to it because you're worried they're going to break it. Don't have it in your office because now you're worried about this thing that's really important to you being broken rather than allowing a client to process things like they need to. Um, Thinking about the setup in there too. What are the things that you need to feel comfortable? You're in your office all day long. So, what are the triggers for you? Also, knowing what are the triggers for you in terms of client behavior and thinking about that and setting up your space to mediate that. Um, think about what you do want and what you don't want on a child's level. What are the things that you want to have up high or out of sight they can't see and they can't get into? Things that maybe have a lot of small parts, like games or beads or things like that you don't want them to just kind of grab. And next thing you know, you have pieces all over your office. You might want to have those up further away so you're the one who's in control of taking that off. But what are things that you might want on their level? You might want some stuffies on their level that if they need to go grab a pillow or grab a squishmallow, that they can do that if they need to have something to hug on. Some larger toys or things, and we'll get to things like the sand tray in a little bit, but toys for that. Toys for free play or dollhouse, things that you want to have on their level. Um, and then having a table or other flat space for them to work at, whether it's one that's always there or one that you can pull out. Um, yeah. Any other thoughts from some of y'all that have set up your offices on tips you've learned, mistakes that you've made, or things that you try to have in your office?
Yeah, I only leave out things that I'm okay with anyone touching, from 4 years old to an adult. If it's breakable, if it's messy, whatever it is, it's away unless it's okay for like 4 year olds. So like I always have some drawing supplies out, but I have the washable crayons and markers out. I don't have my better, more permanent stuff out. That's locked away. So I don't want my 4 year olds making
Mhm.
messes. Um, so that's one
That's
thing.
great.
I always use washable paint. So if you decide to use paint with your kiddos, always use washable paint. That way, if they get it on their skin or their clothes or whatever, even if it dries, they can wash it off. Like any kind of water-based paint is washable. So that way the parents aren't freaking out. Most of my parents don't freak out anymore because they realize I only use washable paint. You can get it at the dollar store. It's not a big deal. That's just a little tip.
Acrylic
Um,
paint is not washable.
Correct.
those little things, no, but you can like Crayola or others will make
The
some that are
washable ones
washable.
are great. All washable markers, all washable anything, because the kids will get it all over themselves.
Mm.
No matter what you try, even if you put an apron on them, they have aprons too at the Dollar Tree or dollar
Mhm.
store. I would recommend getting aprons for your kiddos. When if and when you paint or draw or whatever, just so they don't get their clothes dirty. Or getting even like an old t-shirt or something
Mhm.
from your house and putting it on them so they don't get their clothes dirty. Um, that's all that I always have something for them to protect their clothes because they are gonna get themselves messy no matter what. If you're gonna give them snacks, do not give them candy. You do not want to be responsible for their dental bills. I always give them the fruit snacks, the Welch's fruit snacks, or Cheez-Its or Goldfish. Some kids prefer Goldfish, some kids prefer Cheez-Its. I don't do peanuts, anything with nuts in the case of a nut allergy. I always ask the parents first if they can have a snack. And I always have water. I never do juices or anything just in case. Um, yeah, anything that's touchable or breakable, I keep up high. Anything in my drawers on the bottom, they are allowed to grab, and anything that's they're allowed to touch is out and available for them. So that's what I do with my drawers and things. All the kids know that they're allowed to do that. But that's just a tip from me doing this for about 3 years now with littles. So the youngest I have is 4. So and the oldest I have is like the oldest I've ever had is like 62. So I do everyone. So.
Thank you. Anyone else have any tips or suggestions? Okay, we have all types of toys. So when you're thinking about um, selecting things for your office or to have access to, you want to think about having, um, think about things from different, um, what am I trying to say? Categories. So you have a lot of different things. So, when we're talking about play therapy, please know that like play therapy itself is like a very specific from, going through trainings and certifications through a play therapy organization. So we're talking about using play therapy techniques. That said, depending on what school of thought that someone is trained into on, with a play therapy organization, they may have some different ideas about which toys to have. So, for example, some of the resources I was looking at was saying, with electronic toys and board games, don't have those in your office because electronic games are going to be one-sided. It's not going to be there, and like board games, there's too much structure and room for frustration. Whereas what we'll talk about in a second is how you can use those clients depending on what the client's needs are. So my perspective is having a variety of different things because you're always going to want to start where the client is and have interventions that are going to speak to them, but you're also going to want to be authentic to who you are. Because if you are not authentic and you are not using things that you feel comfortable with, your client is going to see right through it and then they won't feel safe because they'll wonder something just feels off. So it goes to that number one of feeling safe. So, what types of toys are there? Well, there's real life toys. So, those are things that are reflective of things in real life: dolls, doll houses, puppets, vehicles, play money, doctor kits, animals, dinosaurs, even having things like that. Um, you can get these toys at a variety of places. A lot of times, 'cause I don't recommend, honestly, I don't recommend getting your toys from play therapy websites because they're so expensive. When for the most part, you can find all of these toys at garage sales, at Dollar Tree, at flea markets. And just over time, you'll find little things here and there on sale. Just be patient and don't think that you have to have a play therapy office that looks like Angel's or Shayna's or Melissa's when they've been building their therapy toys for years. Um, so but those are some of the things you definitely want to have dolls. You definitely want to have a dollhouse or something that can approximate a home, um, and doctor kits. So you would be kind of surprised by how many clients go towards doctor kits. Then we have electronic toys. So I know that some of y'all and other therapists have integrated the Wii, and brought in like video games, where you're playing either one person, but how you're able to play together. Like, for example, Animal Crossing. It's a one person game, but you can very easily have an interactive experience with another person while playing Animal Crossing, that it's not isolating you from being able to talk to a client. And then, of course, because of telehealth and after the pandemic, a lot of the things that we started to integrate with clients is using electronics. So whether it's using videos, online games, um, there's an online sand tray, any telehealth tools. All of those are things that you can do electronically. I have in our drive, and I'll show you some of that in a bit too. Um, the PowerPoint that Angel made last year, and she has tons of YouTube videos, broken down by different uh, like area, I guess, topic. And she uses these songs and videos in person and through telehealth. So those are resources for you as well. I've also had situations where clients have been very avoidant to directly talk to, like verbally talk to a therapist. This has been more with like teenagers that they've used electronics like a tablet to talk to their therapist, even sitting in the same room, rather than being to a place where they're able to verbalize. They will literally talk by chatting, even sitting in the same room, and then eventually working up to being able to verbally express themselves. So there's a lot of cool ways that you can integrate electronics into therapy. And then thinking about creative expression in your tools. So that would be art supplies, as people noted, making sure you're getting things that are washable, maybe having an easel, sand, instruments like musical instruments, maybe depending on how loud they are, because you do have neighbors. Um, but potentially that could be something you integrate in. Clay, having dress up clothes and things like Legos and perler beads. And um, and that's something there. Um, Shayna's used perler beads a lot with her clients. I don't know if she wants to jump in and talk about that. And then I believe a lot of other people have kind of started using that as well. But if you use that, there's you have to have an iron and a heating source. Please make sure you're the one who's ironing things and not your client, because I don't want anyone to burn themselves. Um, and then Melissa was telling me she just found, the dot art, and they make these big things that you put the little jewels on using the dart thing. I don't, yeah,
Diamond art stickers.
yes.
Diamond art
So they're
stickers,
small
origami paper. I do a lot of origami folds, and I do diamond art stickers with the kids.
diamond art stickers. That's what I
Yeah,
just ordered, some diamond art
they're
stickers
like
because they're small.
they're like small, and you can do them in a session, and the kids love them, and then they can stick them on whatever they like to stick stickers on. It's really fun. It helps them focus.
Adults can do those too. I think diamond art is one of those things that a lot of adults are drawn to because there's a creative aspect of it, but it's also very meditative. And so it is something like Charita was saying, she keeps the coloring sheets, which I have a few books in my office too, if you ever want to come make copies of some coloring sheets that I kind of keep as blank, that are the mandalas or adult coloring books, that you have those things that adults or kids can play, but the same with the diamond art, that, while you're sitting there talking, you can be both working on one of those things. And then that also becomes a coping skill that people can use later and
And
that they're going to see and buy. Go ahead,
I
Melissa.
had my 6-year-old client tell me that it was so satisfying and it was the cutest thing in the whole wide world. She was so funny. It was just
She's
so
not
cute. I
wrong.
could share that. Really cute.
She's not wrong. Those things are really fun. Oh, this is funny because it made me think of it because right next to you on my screen is Allison. Um, and Allison, you had a client, one of your probation clients, that you had those pillows that have the
Yeah.
sequins on them.
Yep.
What did they say to you about that? Because I mean, we're talking like this is someone who had been in prison for years.
Yeah, this was a grown man. And even when we went, especially when we went telehealth, he brought that up every time. He's like, I just need to be back in your office with my pillow. And he would rub that pillow every single session. And he said it was the most calming thing. And then he kind of get mad at himself for wanting slash needing a pillow. But I mean, he went and bought one for home. He said it didn't work as well because it wasn't in the office with that specific pillow. But depending on the day too, it was a gold silver combination. So he would use it to also express, how he was feeling. If he was feeling both happy and sad, he'd put half the pillow gold, half the pillow silver. And then at the end of the session, he'd change it to whichever one he was feeling better about. And so usually it would change to golds because he was feeling a little bit more calm or excited, more of the positive emotion. But yeah, that pillow was his thing. He would not, when he was at home during telehealth, he would always bring that up when he was frustrated. He's like, see, if I could just be back in the office with that pillow, I would be fine. It's like,
Mm.
well, we're not there. Let's grab your current pillow at home.
But creating a coping skill we weren't aware of.
Yep.
Shayna, does Phantom have anything to add?
Sorry. I was gonna say that Phantom needs to start attending. Well, that's not what I was gonna say, but I'm trying to convince Kathy to let me bring Phantom to the office. So if he attends enough staff meetings, I'm hoping um, that he'll be qualified. But anyway,
It's
um,
very intrusive, though.
the clients will love it. Um, a lot of my clients, so I've used perler beads and diamond art and all that stuff with my clients, and a lot of them have bought them for themselves. Um, I would say 10 of my, like, that's even maybe like low, bought perler beads for Christmas this year.
Here's mine
So,
from Shayna, maybe my Slytherin perler beats.
mm. And your Hello Kitty Wonder Woman, that
It's
one's the
over
most,
there, though,
uh,
so I don't want to get up. It's on the across the room.
that's, some of mine are very impressive. I'm very proud of them. Um, but yeah, so a lot of my clients have, and like one of my 18-year-old boy bought a pack of diamond art things because he was like, it's so relaxing. Um, and so it also really helps regulate while talking about trauma. So I
Mhm.
really love that stuff.
Um, Thinking about things too, like popsicle sticks. Popsicle sticks are, you can do crafts with them, but you can also use them in other play because they kind of double as sticks or wood or other things. But you can also do, like sometimes people will make a puzzle out of them. So you take a few of them and you sit them side by side and you create like whatever, a design or write a name or draw a picture that goes across those sticks. But then the sticks can be, you um, shuffle them or whatever, and then that's something that people can put together. Aggressive relief toys. So these toys make a lot of people uncomfortable, but it's a really important thing to integrate into play therapy toolboxes. These would also be toys I would say maybe not have like visual once you walk in. Um, but trust that if one of these is triggering to your client, that they will let you know in some way. So, for example, I used to have a really cool looking rubber knife that it looked like a hunting knife. And one specific client would come in every time. He would dig in my drawers until he found it, and then he would hide it underneath the couch because he did not want to run across it. He wanted to have control over finding it and then moving it so it was out of his way for the rest of the session. Toy guns, making sure that it's very clear that they're toys, like if they have the orange stopper on the end. With that, toy soldiers, handcuffs. I always recommend getting actual metal handcuffs, but the kind that have the little release on it. Um, the plastic ones are crap and you'll break them in the first session, but the metal handcuffs are something about them. Um, as long as it's not a trigger for you to be in the handcuffs. Because if you do have handcuffs in your office, you will spend time in handcuffs because your clients will put you in them. Children, not adults. But a tip with the handcuffs is don't let them get in the sand because if you get sand in the mechanisms, then the little latch that lets it out gets stuck and then you can't release yourself. And then that might create a little bit of anxiety. I might be saying that from experience. Punching bags or other things like that could also be used for that. Also, things that are okay to be destroyed. So that's another thing that popsicle sticks can be used for. Is clients sometimes if they want to break those up or rip up paper, they can have that as well. And then board games, so maybe different card games, board games, Jenga, having some competitive and some cooperative games. Um, and not thinking about things like what can be played in a session. So Monopoly is not one of the things that you can play in a session, but other games are. And again, we have the resource list of some ideas for that. And then thinking about things that appeal to senses. So calm down jars. Um, I think I need to find it. Angel had made a tutorial about those and put that in there. If not, a few of us have the recipe for how to make the calm down jars, where you have the glitter and the glue, and glitter can kind of fall down in the jar. Kinetic sand, because there's a kinetic component to it. Stuffies, little baubles, and things like that. Like um, sometimes the Dollar Tree will have things, whether it's in their toy section or in their party section, where it's almost like little jewels, like big plastic jewels or little rings or things like that, that just, you can get a lot of them, dozens of them for really cheap, but those become things that they may be smooth, things like that. I have um, like polished stones. A lot of places you can get like a bag of polished stones that are, they're like dyed different colors or whatever for pretty cheap. Those have that sensory component to it as well. And like I had mentioned earlier, some things that might have smells that a client has control over what smells they choose. And it can help them kind of explore what is a soothing smell for them. What are some other ideas of toys that you feel like you need to have in your office?
I have stress balls with
Mm.
emoji faces on them. So a lot of times I'll have people go and choose, like, how are you feeling today? And a lot of times they'll just have that. And then I make a rule, please don't throw the ball.
Great rule. I have little fidget cube. Mine is a Hulk fidget cube, which then also is helpful because it has talk about anger. Your Hulk fidget cube.
I was gifted this like caterpillar thingy that I absolutely am obsessed with. And then I went back and got like a couple slugs, and like my clients love them because you can move them, but they also make this like really satisfying like clicking sound. And so then I love when they're like, hey, you can have one too, and we can click clack together.
I love it. My daughter has one on her dance bag, and so when I drop her off, like it's mesmerizing when I watch her walk away and the little slug or whatever is going like that. Where did you get those?
Five Below,
Mm,
like the little ones were like $1.
nice.
I found like puzzles, like little puzzles can be really fun. Like I have a Rubik's Cube and then I have a wooden puzzle that makes like the star thing. Um, and just I'll have those out and people can just grab them and mess with them and play with them.
Nice.
I create gel sensory packs. So it works on different senses for the client. So they can actually, if they're feeling nervous, they can actually push on the hard things inside the gel. But then also because I make it with hair gel, it stays cool to the touch. So it works on multiple things. So actually having different sizes, because I'll make them big and I'll make some really small. And so that's something that we can actually create together. And if I have a client that is in school and they have a lot of anxiety, they can actually make it small enough that they can put it in their pocket, they can put it in their backpack. So we work on different sensory things that way.
So how do you make them?
Uh, get a Ziploc bag to whatever size you want. So either the big ones or the small snack bags. And then you put hair gel in it, and then you can use whatever you want on inside. So you can put like the little tiny beads, you can put the little puff balls. So you can work with different textures inside the bag with the client.
That's cool. I hadn't even thought about that. And gel, like you can get it in different colors too. So then you have.
Everything from the dollar store. It's amazing. But make sure that you double bag it, because some clients, when they're really stressed out, they'll be squeezing it a lot and you don't want the side to pop out. So always double bag, and then I use packaging tape to tape it closed. So security.
Yes. Same with like the calm down jars. Once you have it all filled and everything, you probably want to glue the lid on. What are some other things? I know y'all have some other go-to things that you like that you have found that clients are really drawn to.
Some of
I
my
know.
clients, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say some of my clients are, you guys have listed some of the things, but some of them are really into balloons. So I've noticed that with like impulse control and fall in directions, I usually pull those out, but they love them. They sometimes are like, if I work really hard today, can I leave with a balloon? And I'm like, okay,
Okay.
let's see. Okay. So sometimes they're even like rewards at the end of a day. So
That's awesome. Oh,
Well,
Melissa, you have had, and then I'll jump back over to Olivia. You had recently, we talked last week about your lion hat.
So I have gotten, let me go grab it. Hold on. Let me go grab them. So my kids like Harry Potter and they like Star Wars and stuff. So sometimes my kids need a little bit of confidence when they're talking and they like to dress up. So I have a little Luna Lovegood lion hat. So I love Luna. Her lion hat, the really, really fancy schmancy one, was like over $200. And I'm like, no. So I got this one. It's not as fancy schmancy. The back isn't done, but it does the trick. And the kids put it on. They feel brave like a lion, and they're able to talk more with me when they have it on. And sometimes I just like to put it on for fun. Um, it's fun. And I just put like the microbial spray on it afterwards because, gross. Um, but they like to put it on. And if they want to feel brave, like especially my girls, I have a set for boys as well. If they're feeling like some kind of way and they want to feel hidden, but not really hidden, um, but they don't really want to talk, but they do want to talk at the same time. They want to feel hidden. They want to feel secure. They put on their security specs. And then they feel like somebody else and they can talk still if they want to. And they're hiding. They're somebody else. They're safety specters. They're their safety sunglasses. So they like their safety specs. So these are my Luna Love Good ones. I have some for boys too. They're never underestimate the power of a good pair of sunglasses for your
I
client. So yeah, sunglasses do work wonders for kids sometimes when they want a pair of sunglasses to hide their faces. Sometimes they don't want to have their face open when they're talking. They want to have some safety. Sometimes they want to hide under a blanket when they're talking and have a little cocoon of safety when they're talking. They want to be in their little cave. Some kids are just weird like that. When you're working with kids with trauma, whatever they need to feel safe in that moment, that's what they need. Sometimes they want to be a different person. They'll give themselves a different name. Kids are just, you never know what you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates. They're going to give you something different. I've had kids tell me that they're a different sex when they're talking about whatever happened to them. That's been a weird thing. But you know, whatever. And I'm like, okay.
yeah,
So
the
you just kind of
finest.
roll with it. You just process with them and you validate whatever they tell you and you just normalize it and it's fine. And you know, it just kind of, yeah. But yeah, I like the Luna Lovegood thing because I thought that was really cool. But yeah, whatever you can do to help them process and give them a sense of safety and give them a sense of acceptance and that you are a safe person for them, yeah, they will open up to you. They just need to know that you're a safe person. They can be whoever they want to be with you, and that's fine. Um, and that you're a calm person. You're not going to get upset like their parents are going to get upset. Like you're just the stable person that they need right now. You know, don't get dysregulated. Don't freak out at them. Just be like, it's okay, it's fine. You know, just be stable, be the rock for them that they need in that moment. And that's what all they need.
Olivia, you had something?
Oh, if it wasn't already mentioned, like silly putty is also great because they can manipulate it or stick it to stuff or just have that something to play with in their hands.
Um, the play therapy traditionalists will say when you get um, like figures of like human figures to get generic ones that someone can project themselves onto. And I agree it's important to have some generic, like not a specific character figures, but I challenge that not I to actually also have some named characters as well. Obviously, y'all know that I kind of come from a little bit of a geek therapy perspective that superheroes and other characters of the things that we consume um, serve as metaphors or sometimes goals or things like that, a place for us to project our own um, stuff onto. So having superheroes or having other things like that could also be really helpful for a client. Um, One of the coolest things, like the toys that I used to have that got used so much by children and adults, was I had a set of figures from The Wizard of Oz, which was fine, but the Wicked Witch was used a lot. Um, so just kind of having a variety of things. Um, I also would do things like at Halloween, you can stock up on those more aggressive kind of toys. So the Dollar Tree or whatever would have little plastic skeletons, sometimes used for garland, but I would just cut the garlands off of it, or spiders. But I actually have a bag of bugs right here that need to make their way into somebody's office or multiple people's office, that I got at Halloween. So just things like that to have around. Um,
And also a friendly reminder, you guys can suggest to your clients if there's something that they gravitate towards that they feel safe with, that they can bring that into session. I know like on Mondays, if you guys have seen a 12-year-old boy with a huge, he brings his entire comforter because that's what makes him feel safe. So yeah, so always, I mean, adults too, they'll surprise you and bring like little trinkets in. Like I have a client that brings his a collection of worry stones in. He's an adult and he has worry stones that he brings in because that's what makes him feel safe.
yes, I love it.
And
So go ahead.
the kinetic sand is a big one in my office, and I can't remember what this is called, but they love this spraying. Where you?
Oh yeah, the little I used to have one of those in my
Right.
office too. It's like the little pins that stick their face in it, and
Yeah. The
little
face is the main thing
middle
that goes to it.
finger. I always end up with a middle finger somehow in mine. Um, but yeah, it's fun, but that's also soothing as well. Like just kind of
Hmm.
doing the pins back and forth can also be a relaxing experience.
I actually had a client ask about that yesterday.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was like, you know those things. I want one of those. I was like, oh, yeah.
Oh, funny. So some things to think about when you're selecting toys, making sure that you have toys that allow for exploration of real life experiences and that you're thinking about things that would include different cultural values, traditions, and roles. So that any of your clients are going to find something in your stash that they connect with. Facilitate contact with the child by gaining their interest and attention. I still go by, once you are comfortable enough in yourself, in your skills, and you have a variety of tools, it's pretty easy to get rapport built with a child. Especially when you let go of an expectation that a child or an adolescent is going to verbally process with you. And if that's your expectation of when rapport has been built, you're going to be disappointed because that's not how children and adolescents necessarily process their stuff. They do it through play and through interactions and gameplay for the most part. So once you get to that, it's pretty easy to get a client to be able to interact with you in those ways. It's the parents that we have to make sure that we're also focusing time and nurturing that relationship so they trust you and they understand what you're doing in the room, which goes back to those initial slides that we talked about. Toys and your office should be set up in a way that permits reality testing and lim- and pushing limits, but also give you the chance to set those limits as well. Provide the opportunity for development of self control. That's one of those things too when we talk about the perler beads and the diamond dots and things like that, that there's a lot of little pieces involved. And so to make sure that those pieces don't go all over the place, wanting to make sure we're doing things deliberately and that you're also only presenting the amount of things to a client that they're able to handle at that moment. So you may, with a child that is pretty good self-control, you might introduce more beads or things like that. But if someone has limited, then you might only do a little bit comparatively. Um, Things that facilitate exploration of the self and others, allow the child to express their needs symbolically without the need for verbalization. And I go back to that, I just mentioned that as well, but that I think is one of the hardest things for newer clinicians to become comfortable with is that there's not always going to be a verbalization of I feel better now. I'm doing better now. I feel this about my trauma. My anger makes me feel like this. They're not always going to be verbalizing that. And you don't need it to be verbalized if they're making progress in the other indicators of symptom reduction. Obviously provide for an expression of a wide range of feelings. We didn't talk about it when we talked about items in the office, but it is nice to have things that have representations of different feelings, whether it's a feelings chart, the stress balls that have emojis on them. Emojis, there's a lot of things that are marketed with emojis now, which is nice because clients can kind of different emojis mean different things, and so they can express that in a way that they don't have to verbalize it. But there's often generational differences in how people use emojis. So I often use a thumbs up emoji to indicate to people that, like, received, I got it, I'm okay with that. But apparently Gen Zers feel that the thumbs up emoji is passive aggressive, and I don't mean it in a passive aggressive way, but thankfully I'm mostly sending it to other Gen Xers and older millennials. So I feel like I'm pretty good with that, but I'm sure the gulf will get wider as I get older. Of
Kathy, can I say something too? It's funny that you
course.
mentioned that because in my culture, like if I send a thumbs up like that, it is definitely like you want to start a fight. It's the weirdest
Oh,
thing. Yeah, it's the weirdest thing. So it's funny that you mentioned that. So I try to avoid it.
it's what we talked about last month too. We talk about like a cultural sensitivity as well is knowing who you're talking to, and maybe how if someone bristles at communication you're having, maybe make sure you're processing that so there's not a miscommunication something there. And I may need to rethink using my thumbs up. um I also, one of my favorite gifts is like, I don't use this at work because it is snarky, but there's one of like Lawrence going, okay, when it's like being sarcastic. But also the okay sign now has kind of been a little co-opted by people who are like white supremacist-ish. So the okay symbol is a little weird to use now too. Anyway, but it's also the little circle game thing that people use. So I don't know. Just be aware of when you're communicating feelings with clients that y'all are talking about the same thing. Um, Another one that's kind of fun to use is, and this is in that like self-expression, it's not really play, but it's kind of related to that, is sometimes you'll see like a grid of like 9 different things, like which Princess Leia are you today, which potato are you today, which whatever is which cat are you today. That's a fun one. I have used that with clients in trying to help them identify how they were feeling on a specific day, even if they weren't able to actually give a feeling word specifically. That gave us a jumping off point. And then sometimes we were able to get there where we could actually label what that feeling was. Um, Allowing for creative expression and providing opportunities for insight and self understanding. Toys should also be durable, simple, and easy to operate, allow for success and fun. Okay, this is taken from Angel's the PowerPoint that she did, but it's also in how she structures her sessions. Um, so uh, this is specifically when working with littles, but you can of course modify this as needed developmentally for any of your clients. But sometimes it's hard to maintain attention or to know exactly what you're doing, especially when you have a whole hour, a whole 45 minutes to work with a little kiddo or a kid with ADHD, and feeling like there's some kind of structure and routine to the session. It is really important that there is predictability in the work that we do with kids. So this is it. This is an example of how she structures her sessions. So she first checks in with the client or caregiver privately if possible, because caregivers do need to vent and kids don't need to hear that. They already hear negatives about themselves all day long, often. And it's a good time for psychoeducation and support. Make sure that you're limiting that time, that you're keeping track of time and how much you're spending. I wouldn't spend longer than 10 or 15 minutes with a parent, because then you're going to start, taking away that time from your little kiddo. If you have a parent that might need a little bit additional support and psychoeducation, that's going to go more into like 45 minutes or an hour, you can schedule a time with them separately, and you can build that as a family therapy session, when as long as it's very clearly related to the goals of helping your client. Then checking in with the client so you can assess their needs, focusing on attunement and attachment during this time. How are they doing right now? What's up in their world? How do they see things? It's not necessary that you get them to admit that they're struggling with the same things that maybe their parent is identifying that they're struggling with. You start with where the client is. Then adding a sensory motor component to it, and that is movement, and uh, other things, sound, scent, sight, all of those things. And I'll show you her PowerPoint of her YouTube videos that she's compiled in a sec. And then a skill set component, so some activity that is focusing on skill set with the client, coping skills, psychoeducation, practicing all of those things, communication, etc. And then wrap up, leaving plenty of time for this transition. And then here are some of her tips for wrapping up the session. Make sure you give a 10-minute reminder when it's time to wind down the session. And it isn't because some of your clients will get super focused on how long they have. When you give a 10-minute reminder, at first they may be really focused on it, but then they'll start to realize like, okay, I will have plenty of time to finish what I'm doing, that they don't have to focus on that 10 minutes, that end the whole time. And then maybe that the rest of the session can be a time for free choice or activity, go back into soothing sensory mode, cleaning up, everything like that. Making sure the client is calm and connected before ending the session, and then identify a key skill set for the session to help the client and caregivers that they can remember to rehearse several times a day when possible. Because remember, we are seeing the clients 1 hour every week or two, and the parents are the ones that are with them hours and hours a day. So if you are giving a skill, they have to practice that in between. It's just like doing homework, so that you can teach them that skill, and then you have the parents that are also reinforcing that with them. And give me 1 second. In your in the drive, you have this one that's called Working with Littles. And this is the PowerPoint that Angel has done. And so I pulled those slides. The information is directly from here, and she goes into a little more information with planning. And so it's definitely a good thing to look at. But then she has all these fun videos throughout, and they all have the link to the YouTube where you can go directly there. Um, so all of these little things are different videos, and they're a lot of fun, and they're tried and tested. Um, so you have a ton of fun little things to get into now. So see, it keeps going and going.
Hey, Kathy, is it okay if I ask a question about wrapping up sessions?
Of course.
So I have a client who's, I want to say about 5, and she has autism spectrum disorder. And wrapping up the session has been the hardest part for approximately about 3 weeks. And so we'll be fine the entire session, but I'll tell her she has maybe at 15 minutes. I'll say, hey, we're 5 minutes away from our last 10 minutes. And then I'll let her, she picks the activity, and it's usually sand or Play-Doh. And
Mhm.
last week, or earlier this week, she actually started throwing stuff in the room. And so that was new. And so, and the only thing I've noticed that even remotely stops that behavior is I think we need to go talk to grandma about the behavior that we're displaying. And that is the only line that I have noticed brings her down, trying to get her to ex- express the feeling or name it, or
Mhm.
redirecting her, giving her something different, distracting her does not work when it's time to leave. And she screams too, which I feel really bad for my neighbors, which is Angel and Patricia, but then she screams. And so
Mhm.
I have been kind of hitting a wall with wrapping up sessions with her specifically. And I've even, when I talk to grandma about like what works with these kind of things at home, it's usually a reward chart of some sort, some type of incentive is what redirects her behavior. And so now I've set up her own personal like behavior chart for session. I don't even know if that's ethical.
Yep.
But that is like the only thing that kind of works. And I just been kind of feeling funny about it.
It's totally fine to set up an incentive program that's not, um, you don't. There's a fine line between incentive and bribing, but it's not obviously it's not going to be a huge thing, but a lot of therapists have a little treasure box or things that might have things like little shaped erasers or pencils or little old, McDonald's toys or things like that that are just kind of small things. So it's how long have you been seeing her?
At this point, maybe like 2 months.
Okay. So I would think I would start by thinking about the structure of the session just like that. And so being very consistent with her from session to session and laying that out with her from the beginning, maybe even because she does respond to grandma with both of them in the room and saying, okay,
Yes.
this is what we're going to do in session. We're going to do this and we're going to do this. We're going to do this activity, then we're going to clean up and I would leave that last 10 minutes as something that she doesn't have to clean up anything. So she's not throwing things. So at least you have 10 minutes to kind of put everything back together.
I
Um,
see. No, I like that. And that helps because my next plan of action was to invite grandma to participate in our
mhm,
next session, just to observe the behavior change. And grandma says that she does not behave that way at home and that's only at school. So
okay.
now it's like, yeah,
Which is good because then now you're able to see the behavior that is identified as the problem. So you can start to work on those
yeah,
strategies with her. So if you're doing an activity, part of the things at the end that maybe you can do, maybe look at some of those videos that Angel has and finding one that's about kind of, calming down or silliness or goodbyes or whatever, like kind of search around YouTube and
okay.
find some stuff and you can end on something like that. It's almost like in a way, so how many of y'all have done yoga? And when you end yoga, you end on the savasana, right? So even, those of you who know Melody, who used to do yoga therapy group, she would end each one of those with basically, they called it like it was visualization and stuff, but it was savasana, but kind of wrapping things up at the end and helping bring everything down before sending them out into the world. So I would just be more clear with her, what the structure is and having grandma on board and she knows that. But yeah, it's totally fine to give her like an eraser or something at the end
Okay.
if she's and letting her know like what it's for, like when she cleans up stuff without throwing,
Yes,
target a specific behavior.
always. Got to
Mhm.
connect those dots. But no, thank you so much.
Kathy, I don't know if you can hear me because I'm on Bluetooth. Is it coming
Yeah,
through?
we can hear
So part of that, if you look at it from a connection standpoint, and she's made this connection with you and she has this safe place and now it's coming to an end. So instead of looking at it as a reward for a specific behavior. What she's needing right now is that link, a transition item. So a lot of times for kids that are worried about losing connection, we'll have some kind of transition item for them to take with them and keep safe and then bring back for the next time. And that helps with the kids that are dysregulated because the time is ending and they're losing that special time and they're worried about, especially when they're young, there's not object permanence. And so in their brain, they haven't figured out that they're coming back yet. And so that really helps having something concrete, tactile, specific that they can take with them. And you can start preparing for closing by, okay, what item are you going to take with you this week to keep safe and bring back next time? And that really helps with little kids that struggle with that transition.
Thank you, Angel. That's actually really helpful. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Because I've noticed even reassuring her that I'll see her in a week, nope, not good enough. So I think maybe the physical item will help.
Yeah. Kids need to see, hear, and do. So visual, tactile, sensory, all of those things help it cement in their memory for memory processing. You can tell a kid something, but if they see, hear, and do it, it's going to store in their memory banks longer. So having that item is very special for them. And it can be the same one each week, or it can be a different one, but it's a special time to figure out, okay, now it's the time for picking. We're going to wrap this up and it's going to be time for picking this. What are you going to take with you? Because I have a couple kids that it's very, very difficult for them to transition, and that's what's worked really well for them.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Hmm.
I would suggest too that having those items, if you have items that are transitional, being very specific, because if you have other kids that might play with other toys, you don't want to just pick any random toy in the office because it may be one that another kid looks forward to using all of the time. So that is also something why it is fun. I mean, McDonald's toys again, like I kind of come back to, and I have a ton that can be like in a specific bin or box or something that they can pick something out of there. And then that
Yeah, I
way,
definitely have a separate drawer. It's a specific drawer that they can choose from, and the other ones are not for choosing. And if they try to, I said, well, those are not for choosing, those are for staying here, but you can choose from this drawer. And then we just redirect back to that.
yeah.
Okay. Remind
And
them of the
it should go without saying, but because obviously sometimes it didn't, some of y'all share offices. Don't don't give away someone's stuff for choosing. Don't destroy other people's property. I definitely, when we had other offices, that some of my toys went away because therapist said, "Oh, you could take that with you." I was like, "No, they can't." um, Another really cool place to find things is Oriental Trading Company. Um, and you can often buy things in bulk, and that's also something that if if there's multiple therapists that maybe don't need a gross of something, that they can say, hey, let's go in and split this, and then we can have 100 of these items but split it among multiple people. But from there, like, I got things they made. They were on popsicle sticks, but they were eyes and mouths, and so they were like actual photographs of people, and so you could put them up like that, and that really helps for doing like body language and emotional identification and things like that. Um, so there's some fun things there. Sometimes they have like plain masks that can be decorated, and you can use that to make masks. Or, like Melissa was saying, with using the glasses, sometimes a mask, like even just a half mask, can also serve that function, and they can decorate it as well. So it's fun. It's fun working with kids and adults. Adults can do that too. Mm-mm-mm. Okay, now I want to touch on sand tray therapy. So having a sand tray, and when I was seeing clients, this was one of my favorite go-tos. But a sand tray is essentially when you have a container. It's a a relatively shallow container that you put sand in it. And it is the theory about it is that it allows clients to create their own little microcosm in this container. So everything is kind of contained in that, whether they're processing things in their life or their internal processes, that it is within this specific container. Um, I always had rules that I set forward with the clients about using Sandtray. They were simple and easy to follow. And I actually created a little thing that I would post on the wall above the sand tray. But I kept it really simple. One of my rules was also always keep the sand inside the tray. That if the sand went outside of the tray, then we would put the sand tray away for the day. I always gave a little grace for people that had some impulsivity and little flecks got away. But for the most part, even the most impulsive kiddos could abide by that. Um, and making it really clear which items can and can't be put in the sand, and that they have to clean up after that. So, for example, in one of my offices that I had, I also had a desk in that office, and so my rule for the sand at that time was anything in the office can go in the sand tray except the stuff over here on my desk. Um, Sometimes you might have specific bins that anything in these bins can go in the sand. Um, like I know how Angel's setup is. She has bins like her sand tray on a table and then bins underneath that, and anything in those bins can be in the sand tray. But from the beginning, setting up the expectation of what can and can't go in the sand. I would, sometimes you'll have clients that get upset about some of the things that you're saying is allowed in the sand, but that's giving you an insight into what makes them anxious, how they think about things, what the expectations for them are. What I mean by that is, for example, I would go into Dollar Tree, and you know how, like, at different seasons in the very front, they have little figurines, like little angels or things like that, that I suppose look fancier, that kids will interpret as being like a little, like a fancy breakable thing. And I would always put those as an option in my sand tray things. And some of them would get really upset because they felt like it shouldn't go in the sand because sand is dirty. And then some loved it. So those are all, again, like allowing the kids to process what can and can't go in the sand. Um, there's also ability to do very directive, less directive, but still directive, and completely non-directive in the sand tray work that you're doing. And everything is going to be really client specific and what your end goal is, um, where they are, and also what your treatment goals are. So, what I mean by that is directive and how directive and all of that. Some non-directive may be this is a sand tray. Some clients like to play with toys inside of the sand tray, and then just giving them an opportunity to play with any of the toys or items in there and seeing what they come up with. Directive may be pick out a figure to represent you and to represent your parent, to represent your siblings, and put them in the sand tray. So that would be a directive with that. A directive, but less directive, might be can you create a family situation in here? Or can you play out, a school setting or something like that? So you're not specifically saying pick out something to represent you, but you're saying just in general, pick out characters. So it's how many of y'all have done work with Sandtray? Have you found it to be pretty effective? Okay. One of the things that's really cool is that this actually can also be used for clients of all ages and developmental levels as well. When I did my first training on sand tray therapy, it was me and one other clinician, and the person who was training had a tray out and their toys out. And as they were talking about it, we were given just kind of free range to like play with the sand and play with the toys as it happened. And what we noticed over that hour that we were talking about it when we got to the end is really just kind of naturally the other therapist that was doing the training and we naturally like took half of the tray for them, and I used half of the tray, and we set up little scenes. And then, it was a pretty subconscious creation at the time because we were learning and we were talking with the trainer. And when we got to the end of it, I had set up this whole thing with this house and all of these protective measures like fences around the house and like big scary like dogs and things like that all in front of it. And of course, at that time in my life, I was in the process of buying my first house and moving out on my own, and I had a lot of fears about being a single woman living by myself and all of that. And I realized, like, oh, this is all of that. This is all of like my feeling vulnerable. And so there's these traps leading up into my house because of how vulnerable I felt. All came flying out of my subconscious. um but those are the things, like, if you would have asked me about it directly, I would have been like, no, 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 it's fine, I'm really excited about it. But everything just kind of came out. So those are those things that, even as defensive and defended as a client is, their things are going to come out in their play. um I It can be a really soothing thing also to run the sand through your fingers. I have had a lot of clients who, over the years, would do things where they would just bury things in the sand and then find them, bury things and find them. And it was just a very repetitive, meditative thing. I know I talked earlier about having those gemstones, that they would just bury the gemstones and find the gemstones, bury the gemstones, find the gemstones. Sometimes they brought me into the play, sometimes they didn't. Sometimes you'd have like full on stories and things acted out. Sometimes you wouldn't. um, Army men are very, very popular in the sand. The other thing about sand is that you can actually stand up characters. So you can set up a scene easier than you can just on like a table. But when I worked in a group home, I had a client, 12 years old, had lived in the group home for a few years, very, very defended, wouldn't verbally talk about anything, but every week he'd come in. Every week he would find every single army man that I had, and he would set every one of them up all facing the same way, which was facing to how he was sitting in relationship to the sand tray. And then he had a string that he tied, like, I don't know, something to it to create kind of like a wrecking ball. And then he methodically took down every single character. It was probably 50 little army men. He would methodically, one at a time, take them down. And then he'd set them back up again and he'd take them down. And knowing what I knew about him, I knew that some of the themes that he was dealing with was feeling alone and feeling like the world was against him. And this was just such a visualization of when someone feels like everything is against them, but he was having control over the situation, that he was feeling power in the situation. Um, some of the things that therapists have to be aware of, though, is also their own stuff. Um, Clients will often do things repetitively. And there are times where I would go into session and I would dread it because we did the same thing every single week, week after week after week. And it got boring. And so I would have to remind myself that this wasn't about me and what I needed, and that this was a process that they were doing. I could try little things to um, see if they were ready to alter their play, but ultimately they had to go through their process there. And so what I mean by that too is, like, you'll see play that shifts and changes over time. Um and sometime and though your job is to reflect what's happening, but also to have those little nudges to see how you can change play or push people into those moments of finding play. I mean, change in their play. There is some benefit into figuring out a way that works for you in tracking how their play changes over time. So way back in the early 2000s, I didn't have there wasn't a camera on my phone. So I had just a paper that I would I had like a little box so I could do like a little diagram of what toys they had set up how that I
Oh,
could
I see
write
them
off to
still
the
down
side
there.
what they were. Okay. So I could kind of track and see how their sand trays changed over time. And then of course later once I got a camera on my phone, there were a few times like I would click pictures of the sand tray at the end and could use that to kind of process later, talk about in supervision, all of those things there. What are some things that y'all who have used it have found helpful or suggestions about what you do with using Sandtray? Um, oh, people are wanting a 5 minute break for bathroom, but don't want to miss anything. So we can take a break until let's take a 5 minute break. 11:20, 11:21. Hey, Pylin, how's your kiddo?
He's doing good. This is the last week of school, so I'm dreading summertime. But it has been amazing that my house is so calm during the day. But he's doing really, really good. Yeah, he loves school. He won't have anything to do with me at all in the morning time. So I'm just
He's
like,
just in a
okay,
rush
this
to
is
get
the right
there.
thing. He has his book
Yeah.
bag and everything. Yeah, I'm just so happy for him. But yes, I'm dreading next week.
Yeah. Have to get outside and do some more hiking.
I think so. And I have a monster, right? She's so big now. Let me
I
show you real
know.
quick.
Where's your
Come here, Kay.
baby?
She's 120 now.
Oh
She's
my gosh.
massive.
She loves
And so
you.
she does. But we're getting ready. I just saw at the shelter they have like a black puppy. It's a German Shepherd mix. So I'm getting ready to see if I can get one to be like her, like just playmate and stuff. So she doesn't know what's coming. I hope it's going to be a good decision, but I'll keep you posted on it.
I look forward to it. The chaos.
Yeah, I know it.
All right. So we can get started again. Um, Shayna, are you back?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So
I had
I know Shayna wanted to remind everybody about summer groups, and if Angel's on too, she can talk about hers as well.
Yes, sorry, my camera's off because I had to plug my phone in and I'm
Mm.
squatting in front of it currently. So groups. Um, so I'm gonna have 5 over the summer. I hope. So middle school, high school girls, those are 2 separate. For the middle school girls, it can be for girls going into middle school. So if you have any 5th graders that will be going into middle school, that's a great population to start thinking about. Similar with high school, if you have girls that just finished 8th grade and are going into high school, that's when they would start that. Both are in person. Both we play games to build on the skills discussed earlier. Um, Boys, very similar. Um, I haven't recently been getting enough referrals to do a middle school boys group. I think I do have enough referrals this time. So there will be a middle school boys group and then a high school boys group. Um, so it looks like high school, most of the groups are going to be on Tuesday evenings. So high school boys being at 4:30, high school girls 5:30, middle school at 6:30. And then the middle school boys, I think I'm going to do Thursdays at 4:30. So that's that. Oh, and my virtual board game group is still struggling. So if anyone that wants to do a virtual group, when we meet, it's really great. But right now I only have 3 committed participants, and that's like the minimum possible I can do anyway. So this can be anyone about over the age of 13, though if you have some people that can exclusively only do virtual that you think like would really benefit from board games, I'm willing to like, expand it, but I just need to have more referrals. So that's it. I'll be sending out information soon. Groups are going to start the first week of June. So the 5th of June will be when they start.
Okay. Angel, do
Mine
you
are
have
gonna, yeah,
group
mine are gonna be
information?
a little bit different. Nicole has the flyers, should be in the drive at some point. I'm not going to be holding any in-person groups over the summer. I'm dealing with some health things, and so can't really be as mobile as I would like. So for kids that want to participate for social emotional learning, we're going to be doing Peep in the Big Wide World. We do a sensory motor activity at the beginning, and then we do Peep in the Big Wide World episode, and we talk about different feelings and how problem solving and communication and all of that kind of things. Most of my kids do very well with it, as young as 5, 4 if their parents participate. So if you have some that are wanting to participate in group but can't come in person, Those will be on Thursdays at 4:30, ages 5 through 9, and at 5:30, ages 9 through 12. This will also be the first summer that I'm doing the parent support group over the summer because they literally begged me to do it. And I said, okay, we will give it a try. Typically, I'm very psychoeducation on that. I prepare a PowerPoint. I said we're going to be a little bit more loose in that this go round. We might have a very basic topic, but it's not going to be as education intensive because my health. And they all know that, the ones that have been coming realize what's going on. And so they get it. If you want to refer people to group, they're still going to get a lot out of it, but it's not going to be as, hey, here's a PowerPoint and then we're going to discuss this. It'll be a little bit more free flow. And that group is going to be moving to Thursdays at 11. It's always going to be virtual. Nicole has a lovely group on Wednesdays at 11 for women. And so we had a lot of the same demographic and I was able to shift mine. So now they'll have a chance to be in the same, to be in both groups for those that want to participate. So that opens that up a little bit. So Thursdays are going to be group days for anyone that's in my group, and they're all going to be virtual until further notice. Parent group will always be virtual. That way they don't have to have babysitting or transportation, but my kids group will not be in person until the fall.
Excellent. Nicole, tell us about your group.
I do a women's support group. So we work on a lot of self-esteem, self-worth, values, talk about relationships. What does a healthy versus unhealthy relationship look like? So we work on, and plus supporting each other. So they come to sessions and talk about things that they're going through. Stressors with their children, stressors in their relationship. So it's just a great way to support each other, because I started because I had a lot of clients that they don't have friends. It's like, how do we make friends? How do we find a support? Or maybe they moved here. There were so many reasons of not having someone there to talk to. And so this is just a great avenue for them. And it's virtual. It's Wednesdays at 11 o'clock, except for days that we do our session. So once a month we miss session.
And that is a open-ended group, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So they can join at any point. You can make a referral to that. And then Becca, your group? Is
All
she?
right. So my group, still Mondays at 12. I gotta share my good news because my one girl had her first friend's birthday party and actually invited the group members to her party. So that was really exciting. But yeah, currently we have, it's still a small little group, but we're working on obviously social skills and socializing, and I guess
And it's
my main
focused
thing is kind of
on young
interactions outside
adults.
of the house.
And it's focused on young adults as they're transitioning from childhood to adulthood and independence. Obviously, with it being the end of the school year, you may have some clients that are graduating high school and
Mm-hmm.
wondering what's next. It may be a good time to refer them also, um, so they have some support in that with people who have just recently gone through that or are also going through that now. And Becca, yours is also open ended, so they can make the referral at any time.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. I forgot to mention earlier, I had it on my agenda even, and I skipped right over it. Um, I know, and I've had conversations with a few of you guys about getting into like planners and planning and stuff. Does anybody have any interest in maybe once a month or so doing like a planner luncheon where we bring in stickers and whatever and we share our planning tips and tricks and whatever. And I mean like fun planning, not like scheduling your appointments. I mean like here's my thread spread for this week that's about horror movies. Um like that kind of thing and like using it like integrating that. Is there anybody who has an interest in that? I mean, I have
Can
a
you do
ton
it
of
virtually? Because I've been doing that while we're talking too. I love stickers and stuff. It helps me to calm down a lot. So
Mhm.
if you can do it virtually, I'll join.
Yeah,
I'm
I
in.
mean, we could do it and like whoever's in person, we can bring stuff, and whoever's virtual, like we could just chat about it. Okay. So I'll set it up probably for like a lunchtime sometime. Excellent. All right, we just have a few more topics on this. Let's see. Okay. All right, just some basic tips for talking to kids in a way that will help them feel comfortable and so they'll listen. Um, eh, Obviously, I think all of us recognize that kids are not just mini adults, that their brain is not developed in the same way, and so we talk to them in different ways. But one of the biggest tips, and I don't even remember who gave me this tip, and this was at the very beginning of my career, and it might have even been in grad school. Avoid asking why. Um, Asking why puts clients on the defensive, and that they have to explain their behavior. And so rather than having just an open communication, it kind of puts them off kilter. So I wonder a lot. So rather than saying, why are you doing that? Or why is that character engaging in that behavior, or whatever it is? I wouldn't say engaging with the client, but why is the character doing that? I wonder. I wonder how that giraffe feels. I wonder what you were thinking about at that time. So you're not asking a question directly, they have the choice to answer it or not. So that is one tip of how to kind of use reflective listening, and also having communication continue to go. Sometimes the client will say, yeah, I wonder too. And sometimes they don't do anything, but sometimes they give you a lot. When you're talking to clients, to children, make sure that physically you are getting on their level or lower. We forget that we're tall and we're intimidating to them. So either sitting in a chair or sitting on the floor if you're able, those things that you're physically either at their level or lower. um, Make eye contact with them, and making sure that that's another way that you're connecting when you're getting ready to do some like a skill building thing, that you're making that connection as you're getting ready to talk to them, using their name, etc. um, Instead of saying things like, what are you doing? Or what are you drawing? Say something like, tell me about this picture. Tell me about the scene you created, instead of what is happening in this scene you're created. This is especially like a good tip with artwork, because they're so proud of their artwork. And so if you say, well, what did you draw? They can be really offended, because can't you tell that it's this lovely parrot? Whereas if you say, tell me about your picture, then they can tell you, and now suddenly you know what it is. Don't assume that they will tell you if they don't understand what you're saying. Um, it's even with adults, they don't always ask for clarification. So just watch for context clues if you need to maybe rephrase what you're saying. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Kids especially learn things through repetition. So that's not just in the same session. That is, you will find yourself doing the same thing from session to session to session to session, and asking them to practice these skills outside of session, and that you're telling their caregivers these skills so they can repeat those same things. A lot of those videos, for example, that Angel has given, those clients are then watching them at home too. And a lot of those videos, they're watching from week to week to week. Um, and those kids will be 30 years old talking about, um, the biscotti karate or whatever, and they'll have those kind of memories and thoughts there. Be excited and celebrate even small positives for them. It's okay to be goofy. It's okay to be overly present yourself as not overly excited, but definitely very excited, as long as you're authentic about it. Because if you're fake, they will clock you on it. And be authentically curious. When you're in a session, be present with them. Listen to them with the purpose of listening. to not just what they're saying, but what they're doing and what they're conveying in their nonverbals and through their play. Um, and just and be curious about all of it. And lastly, some tips for documenting. So as always, in the documentation we do, you want to make sure that it's clear the interventions that you're doing and what that has to do with therapy. And it's not just playing Uno. So when you're documenting things, always, first rule is always assume that your notes will be read aloud in court. So, what that means is number one, protect your client's privacy. So, you're going to write in general themes and not specifics unless you're documenting kind of risk issues and that you want things to be pretty clear in there about if there was a risk or if there wasn't a risk. But otherwise, you're going to do generalizations. Number two, make sure it makes sense and grammatically and all of that other stuff makes sense. So, assume that it'll be read by court or parents. We do everything we can to protect and make sure that actual progress notes are not released. We don't release those to parents, we don't release those to attorneys, but there's always a possibility that a judge could court order us to release the progress notes, and we would have to do that. So just make sure that you're writing in a way that has that in mind. When you're working with things like play and art, be careful about drawing too many conclusions. You're going to be noticing more of themes and trends in the play than using it as a specific assessment for what's going on. Don't just assume that a scene that is acted out by the clients is something that is acted out in their real life. They might be acting out something that they saw or they read in other areas. So don't make assumption that you know what that play is about. Just notice things about how their affect is. What are the themes in their play? What do you know about how their play interacts with other things that you know about their lives? And just avoid being too, yeah, making too many judgments about it. In your progress notes, we remember, don't forget to address safety, interventions, mental status, and if there's any changes in play behavior, and focus on the what and the how. What are they choosing? What are the toys and the activities that they're choosing to do in your office, and how are they interacting with them? Those are some of the things that you can put in your notes. You don't need to do a play by play of, and then they put this character in this setting, and then this character said to the other character, this is no, just like what are the general themes about it. Um,
One tip for documentation that I want to include, even though we're talking about play, I don't ever refer to it as play therapy. I don't refer to it as play-based techniques. I categorize it as experiential interventions or somatosensory interventions, because from a copyrighted perspective, you're not allowed, unless you're a registered play therapist, you're not allowed to even put that on your credentialing that you offer. Like, they get very uptight about that. So that's something I've learned over time. Be careful with how you word that. And then in court, when you're talking about experiential interventions, they go over much better than saying, we played Uno. So we did an experiential intervention to work on frustration tolerance or to help connect cause and effect. And so it's a way to explain what you're doing a little bit more clinically, but that's also lay friendly. So just FYI.
Yes, great suggestions. You can also refer back to the first couple of slides. So, for example, the slide that talks about the benefits of board games or the benefits of play, you can use some of those statement words or link them in. And then this thing that I stole from Ken Schwarzenberger that he had online that's available for everybody, and I linked back towards it. He has a lot of statements that are really like a good thing to integrate into the work that into the notes that you do, the documentation that you do. So he starts with kind of goals, like, so maybe what are some of the goals of sessions that you're when you're working with kids and also for caregivers. Sorry. So that gives you some examples of things like increasing nurturing and protective parenting skills. And you notice all of these really kind of stay away from play. Um, Interventions. So, for example, here provided safe and empowering mediums and then gave some suggestions of those. You can write toy, sand tray, all of those things there. And so there's different ways of how you can um, document the interventions that you're doing in a therapeutic way, and then how the client responded to it. And so these can be used in progress notes, and they can also be used in developing the treatment plans for the client. So there's a lot of things there, and then a sample note at the end of that. Now, what I have with that, and then, for example, there's like progress note, like sample wording that everybody gets when they first start here. So I'll probably integrate that in there. But with that, I print them out and I keep them in a little binder on my desk too, and a little protective sheet. So I always have those to reference. So it makes me sound smarter, or at least sometimes if I'm searching for phrases or words, it helps me with that. Also, when I'm writing letters or things like that, it's nice to not have to reinvent the wheel every time you're documenting things. So yeah, simple notes should be 5 to 7 minutes, and then that's it. We have a few minutes left, so I would love to have questions or people share things that they've done that have been fun, either interventions or techniques you've developed or that you've learned from other people that have worked really well. Nicole?
Um, I noticed when I was doing play therapy, like doing the sand trays with little ones that are aggressive and impulsive, I was stressed out. So I actually would make rice trays, rice bins instead of sand because it's so much easier to pick up and they can help you pick it up. And then we can kind of process what just happened and they're distracted while they're doing it. So it works out so much better for me personally, was transitioning into rice instead of sand.
I
Now,
love
some
it.
up very well, so you gotta kind of play with it. But that's what I would do.
And that goes into making sure you know your own triggers and how you can stay regulated. And so you're making your office the way that, can help keep you on, keep you sane. One of the things that I did when I had my sand tray is I used a blue, it was like one of those like kind of translucent-y blue, but a blue bin. Also, there's a wooden one around here somewhere that the bottom is painted blue. And one of the reasons that I liked that is because if they move the sand or the rice aside, then it can be like water. And so sometimes clients like to do that to integrate that in.
I have two things that I pretty much always do with all of the kids that I work with. One is creating a sensory bottle for them to take home, and I specifically call it a sensory bottle instead of a calm down jar because kids are concrete and they think they're only supposed to use it when they're mad, and I want them to use it all the time. And so we talk about using it, if you're feeling tired, you need to wake up, or if you just like looking at the glitter to practice your breathing. So we talk about all different kind of scenarios that they can use their sensory bottle. And you can put different kind of things in it. Like there's a tutorial somewhere that I did that you can find that talks about how much glue to glitter ratio for how long you want it to fall and different kinds of sequence and stuff like that. The other thing I do, and it's for the sensory motor component, is I do personalized bubbles with my kids. So I'll get like the little wedding size clear tubes and we will make bubbles for them to take home and practice their breathing, and we'll practice it in session 2. And so I use little scent bottles from they use to make bath bombs. So I use the dye from that and the scents from that because I know they're skin safe, and we'll make their own full sensory experience in using the bubbles and have them take it home and practice that on a regular basis. with the goal of creating a positive conditioned response to breathing. And I have a training on that, and when I feel better, I'll offer that at some point. But we're looking at using sight, sound, smell, and all the fun connection, the serotonin, the dopamine around breathing. So when the kids become dysregulated and the parents can say, time to breathe, the brain already starts to flood with some of those chemicals to help them start to calm down. It's something that you have to do very consistently to form that connection, because positive connections form a lot slower than a really bad negative connection. So it takes time and effort. But the scented colored bubbles are something that every child will get, and I've used it with adults too, and they enjoy it. And it's one of the most effective things in my toolkit to use with my clients.
I used that. You gave me some bubbles that I used when I was doing one of the, like career day at my daughter's school, and so I had a classroom full of third graders, and actually I had two classrooms because they shoved everybody in there, and so I did that where we made art with the bubbles because they were colored bubbles, and so they would blow them and then catch the bubbles on paper, and then it looks like, because the bubbles burst and they're little circles and splatters and stuff, and so it looks like little watercolor. It was cool. And because it was the bath bomb colors, it is what do we say, washable,
Yep,
because there
WK.
were colors all over the classroom.
Mhm.
So, Shayna, what is like a your maybe like a basic board game that you feel like is your go-to with everything, that would be a good one for people to learn how, other than Uno, not Uno.
Really hate Uno. I really, really, really hate Uno. Um, if I can get away with a week without Uno, it's a good week, which is actually a lot of my weeks because I'm like, no, which is terrible. I know, but I'm like, let's play something else.
You
Um,
can always get away with it if you don't have it in your office. I'm just
yeah,
saying.
yeah. Skip Bow is a good alternative to Uno. That can be used with, I would say probably 6 or 7 and up. Um, because it's more challenging than Uno. You have to be paying more attention to things, but it's still simple enough that a 6 or 7 year old could grasp it. Um, but it might take more time for them to grasp it. I played it with a 6 year old recently, actually, and she was so distracted through half of it, but then like got really focused into it and then was disappointed when we ran out of time. But that was a good lesson of, hey, it took us some time to be able to focus on this, and that's okay. Um, and it's cool to like teach your clients. So something I've been realizing as I've been teaching clients games is how much trust it builds, because they have to trust that I'm giving them the correct instructions and that I'm going to guide them and actually want them to be successful. I saw it yesterday. I taught an intern how to play a game with one of my clients, and both the client and the intern were both looking to me like, what do I do? Um, and so it's really cool. And the other thing is just following through with a commitment. That's a big thing we've been working on in the group home with games. And I realize that's not the question Kathy asked, but a go-to game, I would say Skippo is really, really good. And then I'm trying to think for like 8, 9, 10 year olds. Sequence is another really good one. Because you have to pay attention. It's like a board with a bunch of cards on it's as a really poor explanation. Um, but that's another really good one. It's very simple. Both of those, Skippo and Sequence, you can have a conversation over easily. And I would say they're comparable as far as like simplicity to Uno. More complicated stuff, I can get more in depth. But for simple stuff, I would recommend those over Uno. I think that they build on skills better than what Uno builds on.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I have a couple of things.
So I started getting teenagers recently, and some of them don't feel comfortable writing into a journal. So what I have them do is when they come to a session is, to write out their feelings or write a letter in the first part of the session. And that way, as we process the letter, they can tear it up and put it in the trash themselves. That way they know their information is safe and nobody else is going to read it. And another thing that I started to do with all of my clients is to make a ABC book of coping skills. And they have to decorate each letter of the alphabet and come up with their own coping skill. So that way, at the end of 26 weeks, they can take home and they can utilize this book every single time.
I need to make one of those for myself. I like it. I've done not that, but like kind of with self-care, and this is something you could do with kids or adults, is I made like a self-care bingo board in one of my journals one time, where I, created a bingo thing and then put a lot of different self-care tasks in there and then put it on myself to mark off when I've done them until I achieved bingo. So it held me accountable a little bit.
One of the things I started doing with my littles was creating emotion puppets for the basic emotions, where we put the emotion on the front of the puppet stick. It's just a popsicle stick with the emotion on the front. And then on the back, we'll put how what situations make them feel that emotion,
Nice.
what things contribute to that emotion. And then they can take them home and they can use those puppets to denote when they feel that emotion non-verbally.
Yeah.
And then I send the video home that correlates to the book that we read that relates to those emotions. Because we read the book, we do the puppets. There's like a workbook, and then I send the video home with mom or dad or caregiver, and they do the book at home every night. And then when they come back, we talk about puppets and how they use their puppets, and then we do more activities relating to emotion identification, that kind of thing, so that little one knows what their emotions are, so they have those words to express what they're feeling, that kind of the basic emotions. And then we get into because it's just basic emotions, then we talk about the feelings relating to those emotions, those kind of things. So it's just a basic thing.
One of the things that you can do once you get beyond your basic happy, sad, mad, glad, um, and to start doing like um, intensity of emotions or different kind of emotions like that, is you can use paint chips from Home Depot or whatever that have, you'll get a thing and it's all red colors, but it starts like pink, darker pink, da da da, till red. And so you can use that to be like, you know, like angry, furious, enraged, like through that, and help them kind of see the different levels of intensity of feelings, and that there's different words to explain them too, so they can
Basic,
respond accordingly.
this is happiness, this is love, this is anger, this is anxiety, this is confidence, this is love, like basic, like the
Mhm.
6 or was it 8? So, and there's one for confusion too, which is nice.
There's in the drive somewhere in the clinical tools, there is a folder, I think, feelings identification, and it has a few different feelings charts and stuff too. All right, y'all. Well, thank you very much. And yeah, have a good rest of your day. If you have any fun activities to add, send them our way and we can add them to the drive. Bye.
Bye.